Power up and spread the light. I got a fantastic show for you tonight. Dear friend of mine, never met the man personally. I love spending time with him, even though he's on another side of the country. Wednesday night, 7 p.m., Center of Light Radio is back after a year hiatus. I needed a break for a while. 7 years will get to you after a while. You can do what you love, but when it comes sort of a task, you just want to put it aside for a little while. And that's what I did. I'm glad to be back. A couple of announcements. If you would, please share this to your wall. Greatly appreciated. Hello, everyone in YouTube land as well. In this forum, you will see a group of links. YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Donate. Support my work as to why I'm able to do what I do and be able to offer it to you for little to nothing except your presence and your time and your appreciation. Notify me when Keith goes live. That button, that ellipsis in here somewhere. Center of Light Radio is now 24/7. Ish. Ish meaning when I do a program like I'm doing now, I can't use the machine twice. So there is some downtime. You can find that broadcast as often as possible on my Facebook personal wall, facebook.com/Keith Anthony Blanchard, or you can find it forever pinned up at facebook.com/Center of Light Radio. I also want to say thanks to Tom Schaefer at videoshow.live. Go check it out. If you got an open tab, an available tab, go check out videoshow.live/center, as in the center of your being. You know what I'm saying? That magical space, that Stargate. And that's a lot of what John and I are going to be talking about tonight. Mysticism in the age of apocalypse. I would like to show you what I have coming up for you later tonight. I think I have it on here. Give me 1 second. I do presentations as well, and I don't have it here, so we're going to just keep moving forward. We're going to go into a commercial break. I'm going to be right back with my dear friend. I haven't spoken to in just over a year, Mr. John C. Robinson, and we're going to be speaking about mysticism in an age of apocalypse. Check out my friend, Miss Jackie Atwell. And that ain't it. Hello, beautiful friends. Keith Anthony Blanchard here with an amazing product offer. We have been hearing about hemp oil for the last couple of years and its potential. Let me introduce you to my dear friend, Miss Jackie Atwell. Our oil helps bring your body back to a state of wellness. It is also used as a preventative from illness. It works by bringing the body back to homeostasis and balance. It's a natural, organic, non-GMO, full-spectrum oil. Third-party tested and comes with a certificate of analysis. Posted on our information page. Awesome anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. If you are suffering in silence, give it a try. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. 60-day empty bottle money-back guaranteed refund. To order, go to www.hempworks.com/Jackie Atwell. That's www.hempworks.com/Jackie Atwell.
She floated through the room. Her light was so blinding, the energy of her love. She said goodbye and turned into a dove. As I watched, she floated through the room. And as I cried, she was there to dry them too. Hold me and don't let go. Hold me, never leave. Hold me and don't let go. Hold me, never leave. Never leave. She turned to me, told me life was not too easy unless you can let go. Reveal to me the beauty of your soul.
Welcome back to Center of Light Radio. My name is Keith Anthony Blanchard, strapping on my brother and sister astronauts as we launch for inner space. Center of Light Radio, the transformation station, and radio for the soul. It's time to get down, I believe, to Center of Light Radio business with my guest, Mr. John C. Robinson. Let me tell you a little bit about my friend, Mr. John C. Robinson. Tonight, we're going to be talking about mysticism in an age of apocalypse. John C. Robinson is a clinical psychologist with a second doctorate in ministry, an ordained interfaith minister, the author of, listen to this, 9 books. Do you have any idea what it takes to do this kind of work? 9 books? I have 5, and I don't stop. The author of 9 books and numerous articles on the psychology, spirituality, and mysticism of the new aging. By the way, the subject of mysticism, everyone, is probably my favorite of all. And a frequent speaker at conscious aging conferences across the country. A deep way of knowing and a new kind of seeing. Oh my God, he and I have been speaking the same language. John says to call these end times is hardly hyperbolic. We're in trouble, he says. And the signs are everywhere. Political standoffs, poverty, and the homelessness. Yeah, no joke, it's obscene. Racism, sexism, and ageism, arms buildups, unending war, and, most of all, terrifying climate disruption associated with global warming, degrading resources, species extinctions. I think the last black rhino, whatever, just died, and catastrophic weather, floods, and fire events. It is obvious that we are the problem, he says, and I absolutely agree. If you don't like that, ask yourself, why does it rub you raw? Look around. Each of these crises originates in the human psyche, yours and mine, driven by left brain beliefs, illusions, and obsessions. We race headlong toward the collapse of civilization, but the solutions also lie in the human psyche, arising from a most surprising source, the brain's natural mystical consciousness. The crisis before us demands not only social, political, and technological action, but also a mystically infused metamorphosis of personality, relationships, and our perception of the entire Earth community. Dear Lord, we need not abandon science, social activism, technological innovation, or interfaith dialogue, no joke. But we must add mystical consciousness to our local and global activism, merging right brain mystical awareness with left brain science and logic. We integrate the mystic's path into our urgent collective transformation. You can find more about my guest at johnrobinson.org. My bro Ham, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
How you doing, brother? What's happening in your universe?
Oh my gosh! Well, I'm just so absorbed in this material that I took a couple years off of writing. I felt like I had really said all I came here to say, and I thought, well, I've put it out in the world. I have to let it float down the river and have the effect it will have. And then, so I was mostly working on my own mystical transformation, writing a lot in my journal and so forth, and experiencing new things and evolving my soul. And then one day I suddenly realized I had to get back into the game, because this issue of global warming is like a freight train heading down the tracks, racing at us so quickly, and we are not prepared, and most of us are still in denial about the really profound and pervasive effects it's going to have. And the answers are not going to be found only in social and technological changes. They've got to be found in our own transformation as people, because we are the cause of all this. Our consumption, our involvement with carbon production and pollution and our greed, really, for have more and more and more, when in fact what we really need is to be, not to do. We need to awaken into a kind of a mystical appreciation for the fact that everything is already complete and divine and pristine. The mystics have been telling us from the dawn of time that when we learn how to wake up, when we see the world as it really is, unclouded from all this belief system that we carry around, oh my God, when you talk to people who've had mystical experiences, or when you learn to enter mystical consciousness, you realize that there's nothing else you have to change. You just have to stop and wake up. And in the process of coming deeply into your own mystical nature, you are transformed, and then you start living a different kind of life. It's not about convincing people, because that's more logic and argument. It's about being the divine being that you already are. And from that place, you have an energetic, synergistic effect on everybody, and you live a better life. So this change is not going to happen. We may not save civilization unless we can individually save each one of us on our own, in order to create a new climate of consciousness.
So, John, to achieve this level we call mysticism.
Yeah.
Everyone pretty much is a mystic, so congratulate yourself for that. You're a mystic. But people who take on this as a lifestyle, I don't mean lifestyle, I mean lifestyle, for the essence of life itself. In order to get there, it's the same, it's all the spiritual stuff you've ever heard: love, peace, finding a state of balance within yourself. So for those who are not familiar with the term mysticism, or even that's like climbing Mount Everest, since we're looking at the Himalayan mountains behind us, we're talking mysticism here. Mysticism associated not always with India, but the masses there who are mystics, who seek out God in such a fervent way. There's nothing they want otherwise. John, it somewhat describes people like you and I. Yeah.
And I think we need to distinguish between religion, spirituality, and mysticism, because they're not the same thing. A church or a synagogue or a mosque of 300 people will have one religion, but 300 different spiritualities, because spirituality is our personal take on what we've been taught and what we experience and what makes sense to us. But it's still a matter of belief systems. Mysticism transcends belief. Every religion, every major authentic world religion was born from one of these profound mystical experiences, like Jesus had, or Buddha, Moses, whoever. And from the religion, from this mystical experience, it was so profound that people gathered around them and began to write down and record what happened, because it was such a life-changing realization about our place in the world. Over the centuries, however, egos start getting involved, and people forget what the original founder really said or what he meant by what he said. And personalities and geographies and ecological times begin to change the message. And that's why mysticism, which is the firsthand experience of the divine, literally feeling it, sensing it, being there firsthand, opens up this whole original experience, this ultimate nature of the world. And when we see the world the way it really is, we are changed. And we discover that we are not who we thought we were, and the world is not what we think it is. It's all of our thinking that is driving us to civilization, to the brink of destruction.
And that brings me to a perfect bullet point. The rise of the false self in a false world. Listening on it, John, you working on a new book, the Mysticism in an Age of Apocalypse. Is this a new book you're about to be done with? You're done writing? You're about to publish? Where are you in this book? And
yeah,
that was the first bullet point
editor,
from that
so
book.
I'll get it back from her in a month, and then we'll send it off to the publisher.
Let me ask you this real quick before we get into the question I posed about the rise of the false self and a false world, because when I was reading your bio and you said a new way of seeing, for those who follow my work, we're talking about seeing, a new way of seeing. Seeing is not this thing. Seeing is this thing. Seeing is these things. Seeing is this. It's a way of taking in information. But before we get to the rise of the false self in a false world, totally lost train of thought. So tell me about this rise of the false self and a false. Oh, what I was going to say was about writing this book. What is it, even though you are number 9 or number 10? Either way, I'm on number 6, whatever. What is the feeling that you have when you hear FedEx and you open that door, right? And there's that box you've been salivating to see, and you finally crack that open. All those years of blood, sweat, and tears. When you pop that open, what is that energy for you?
You know, it's just the energy of joy. It's the energy of freedom, of liberation. We are trapped in a mindset that defines the world with thought. So we walk down the street and we name and label everything. That's a car, that's a house, that's a person. There's an alcoholic. This is a celebrity. You know, these are cars. But that's not what anything is. That's what we say it is. When we stop thinking and heighten awareness and look at and experience the world intensely and without thought, it becomes a mystery again. And more than that, it becomes brighter and more radiant and more holy and more astoundingly beautiful and more filled with this one single consciousness that permeates the universe, which is the consciousness of presence or the divine.
So you're talking about non-judgment.
I'm talking about non-thinking.
Non-thinking, exactly. Completely. Yeah. There's nothing, because even if you're really not thinking, you call this thing a tree. That is a thought, but non-judgment means I am vacuumed. I'm void of all this stuff. So I am completely open and readily available.
You know, when I walk by a tree and I'm walking in the forest and I move into mystical consciousness, I feel the living energy consciousness flow of the world, of the natural world around me. And as what's his name says, the world is not a collection of objects, it's a communion of subjects. And everything around, including the apparently inanimate, is conscious and alive and present. People who have major mystical experiences will say, and I could give you a few examples if you're interested, will say things like, you know, everything was alive, including the broken glass and the rock and the pavement. Everything begins to be so imbued with the divine that you are in a radiant world. You are literally in the awareness of heaven on earth. Now, in that awareness, you do not destroy things. You do not start wars. You do not violate other people. You really realize that everybody you're seeing is more of the same divinity. From that kind of radical pantheism, we would change the world. Instead, we call some people good and some people bad, and we create narratives of who needs to be punished and what kind of wars we should have and why I'm rich and you're not. And that kind of stuff is creating a false world and a false self, because you're not who you think you are, and the world is not what you think it is. And this whole thinking process literally creates it's like going to the movies. You see something completely unreal, you get caught up in it, and you forget that when the lights come on, none of that was true.
You know, John, I made a meme today that said, God is the natural state of everything.
Yeah, that's right.
The chair you're sitting on,
Yeah.
we think it's static. It is static in the form
Yeah.
of our understanding, but the chair is alive. It is alive. It's imbued with life itself. When you take life
Right.
out of the equation, you unplug from the generator, it goes out simply like a light. So, John, another bullet point, I'm loving these things. It's like I can't wait to get my hands on your work. What's happening to our world? I can sit here and my people who follow me know my take, but I have no doubt whatsoever your thoughts on this, your chapter on this is going to echo and support what's happening to our world, sir.
Well, you know what's very interesting. I want to get into this business about the split brain for a second. I know it sounds a little strange, but I'll explain it, and it's just really profound. So in our evolution, I think we were much more mystically oriented in our past, in our evolutionary early years, because we had to be so tuned into what is in order to have survival, in order to understand the nature of things and have relationships with animals and trees and foods and so forth. When the left brain began to develop its incredible capacity for language and speech and thought and logic and information that was stored, the survival value of that was immense. And so over the millennia, the left brain became so powerful and it created an idea of itself. So it thinks it's running everything, that we created an alternate world that is not the same as the world we actually live in. It's a model, it's a template, it's a picture of the world. Now, this is actually evident in our brains. Back in the 60s, when certain people were having, untreatable seizure disorders, and neurosurgeons would cut the corpus callosum between the two hemispheres of the brain. And that would stop the seizure from migrating from one side to the other. But it also exposed an incredible and surprising reality, and that is that there were actually two of us inside. The one in the left brain was the one we thought we were. The one in the right brain is the mystic. And the people who did this research, studying these people, and it was very fascinating research, finally concluded that the only thing they could really draw from this, in addition to brain differentiation, was that there were two different sources of consciousness inside, two different selves. And you see this all in the problems of split brain people were having. For example, a woman might be picking out clothes from her closet with her right hand, left brain, so that's the left side, thinking it knows what's supposed to happen. The left hand would be picking out other clothes. The right hand would be trying to put clothes in a suitcase. The left hand would be taking them out and throwing them away. The right hand might be lighting a cigarette or starting a drink, and the left hand, meaning the right brain, the mystical brain, would be putting out the cigarette. They even asked one guy, each side of the brain, whether it believed in God. The left side said no. The right side said yes. So when I became more and more interested in this reality that we actually have these two sides, and now here's the critical point. The left brain has access to language and speech. Okay, so it runs the show. The right brain can't start talking. It has to borrow the left brain's language function. The left brain is like a dictator, runs everything. So we have forgotten the fact that like you say, we are already mystics, and the mystical consciousness is there. We just never stopped to open it. And so the world we've created, which is a world of conflict and narratives and warfare and so forth, if we stop thinking and silence that world, the mystical, here and now, acutely aware consciousness of the divine. All consciousness is actually divine consciousness. So this consciousness begins to flow into our awareness, and we start looking at the world and we say, you're not an enemy. None of this is what I thought it was. And the joy in this discovery is incredible, and the freedom now to love a world without having to fix it, without having to fight for it. There's enough for everyone. As long as we believe you are you and I am I, and we each are real people, we are fictions, then we're going to have a fight. And as soon as we realize that we don't exist as we think we do, we are actually forms of divine consciousness, then everything is different. The global calamity coming our way is like speeding up the demand for personal transformation. Either we do it now or we're going to pay a huge price. And that's where it all comes together. We have this mystical right brain and this domineering left brain, and we really need to shift the balance because they're so far out of balance, we only listen to one side. I rambled up there.
No, I love it. In my work, the divine principle, Spirit says, if you would all live the lives that you will be living when the calamities come to pass, there would be no sense for them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because we can either come together and avoid such calamities, or the calamities is what is going to bring this together. When that hurricane and that flooding took place in Texas some years ago, people got to the business. They came together. John, what came to me, since we're talking about mysticism in an age of apocalypse, was mysticism, again, like I said, for the audience who may have not been here, is a lot often associated with India. What comes to mind as we see the monk and the Dalai Lama, these people live their lives in a posture of namaskar, humility and sincerity, and all these wonderful attributes for achieving successful mysticism. But John, what came to me before we go to commercial break is what these monks are doing in these caves years on end without eating. Well, as much as they have to, they eat or use a restroom, whatever it is, to move about, just to whatever, take a break, quote, if that is applicable. They're in these caves, deep within themselves, forgiving wounds of others' transgressions as well as the ones they applied upon themselves. What are your thoughts about that, brother?
Well, I think time out of the world is incredibly important, not only for the individual, because when you're out of society, you're not being constantly triggered to come back into the world of man, which is this patriarchal belief system about who you are and what you should do. It's the whole mental structure. And when you drop out of that, your voice becomes quiet. You begin to grow comfortable with silence and stillness. And those are the gateways to the divine. You find God in silence, in stillness, and deep inner awareness, because then thoughts are not ripping you out and putting you into this false world. The whole business about mystical activism is that if you can learn to stop thinking, and we can talk about how to do that, when you stop thinking and started seeing the world as it really is, you are a different person and the world is different, and all of us would be living in a different way. So the silence, the withdrawal into caves is helpful, but also I believe it helps the morphic field, as some would say, of the entire universe. We are affecting the ethos, the consciousness of the whole world, and to the extent that we can quiet and deepen our souls, we are sending ripples out into the world.
Wow. Everyone, stick around. Keith Anthony Blanchard, your host of Center of Light Radio tonight. My guest, Mr. John C. Robinson, and we're talking about mysticism. And in the age of apocalypse, mysticism, that's the hope. Apocalypse, that's the dark. Where are you leaning? Where are you leaning? And guess what? As great as the great gets, as horrible as the horrible gets. And you need to find yourself in the center of all that. Because when you do, you're greater than the great and you're greater than the horrible. You're the third thing that happens. You're the phoenix. You're the Buddha. You are the it. And no matter what, you always have a very simple choice.
Remember that all things are possible. You must choose to be accountable, responsible, enough to believe, and open your heart to receive.
rise above and look at your life, and you see the life you live, can you be surprised that it all turned out this way and not the way you planned? It's about what you know and what you understand. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Learn to follow that inner voice inside. That's the one that's telling you not to run and hide. See what your life could be when you visualize. It's about what you choose, that's your real life. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Now it's time for you to plan out your life, seeing what you do by your own design. It's all up to you to make it what you can. It's of your own free will, what don't you understand? Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Your life is a choice. Choice, life's a choice. It's a choice. Make a choice.
Welcome back to Center of Light, everybody. Good to see you here on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. I think this is going to be my schedule, at least for now, for quite a long time. Still trying to find my way. I'm not sure what this living being is going to become. Thanks for having me back after a year hiatus. Feels good. I'm supposed to be back. I went down to Orlando, Florida to do a presentation with my brother Steve Lancaster. And something happened. Something said, Keith, this is the rest of your life. And I'm saying, oh my God, are you serious? I love it, but I don't know. So this is what I'm going to be doing. Tonight my guest is Mr. John C. Robinson, and we are speaking about mysticism in an age of apocalypse. My brother, welcome back to Center of Light.
Thank you.
John, during the song break, everyone who knows me knows that when I go use the restroom, I get hit with information. I even asked this of my master, my Lord, who I've been blessed to know for about 5 years. He said, yes, this is true, yes, yes. He says, it's very common knowledge in India. When you go to the bathroom, you're empty. You have no agenda. So the mind is not full of stuff. You just have this simple task you got to perform, right? And what came to me, sir, was... and I know what you're going to say. I know you would likely say, or anyone like you would say that, well, I'm already integrating that in my everyday conscious waking state of life. That being said, we're still here. We might be doing this elevation thing, but we're still here. We're not there just yet. When John goes to bed at night, if that's where they happen, or in meditation, how does it feel to be you when the mystical experience starts to go down and you actually find yourself in there going, wow, this is actually happening? What happens to you?
Well, There are three kinds of mystical experience. There's the really big one, like Satori or enlightenment or cosmic consciousness that is uncontrollable, unbidden, a surprise that happens to religious and people and atheists alike. Then there's a small mystical experience that we're all very, familiar with, like the kind of sense of awe and sacredness at the birth of your child, or at the passing of somebody or standing below a giant redwood tree and just being in awe. All these things are when the mind stops and you suddenly realize that everything is infinitely beautiful and imbued with the consciousness. The third kind of mystical experience is what I've been calling mystical consciousness, and it's the kind that you can actually, it's a practice, you can actually do it. And it has to do with skills that allow you to move from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. So it's something that I've learned is fairly easy to do, and I do it often. It's really kind of my practice in the world, in my practice in my life. When I move into mystical consciousness, it is such a relief to not have to be a person, to not have to have a personality, to not, have goals and objects. It's like Meister Eckhart, the great mystic, said, the way to live is to live without a why, to live like a rose, to have no why about your life. And so when I let go of this whole charade of identity, time, and story, and move pure consciousness, I just feel like dancing. I could go out especially when I do this outside. I just feel almost like I can't stop myself from rolling in the dirt, and just rubbing it. There's a sense of being one with creation that is so joyful that it's like there's no place to go, there's nothing to be, there's no effort, no time, no goals, no identity, none of that, because all of that was conceptual. And when the conceptual is gone, it's like this whole thing is just, you are living in the consciousness of the divine, and that transforms your perception, transforms your experience of yourself, brings up joy. It's an entirely different world. That's why I'm trying to write about it, because it's not about
Good luck.
It's not about having more things. It's not about defeating anybody or being famous or rich. It's about waking up. It's all here.
It's amazing that every time we go into that kind of experience that we are able to remember what we often forget.
Yeah.
It's never ended. It's just that we just kind of unplug. If you can imagine that we live in eternity for eternity, that shit gets boring. When you go to an amusement park, you don't get on the Ferris wheel. You get on the frickin' roller coaster. You want the bang. You want the buck. You want the blitz and the gling. And I get that. But after living so many experiences of that, like John is saying, is when you have those moments of just walking in a forest, or if it's during sleep that you're able to open up and because you're vulnerable now and you touch your soul. And then you connect to something, whatever your method is, that you've had that experience. If you can take the volume and turn it up to infinity, that's what awaits you.
You are the divine. All consciousness is God's consciousness. All being is God's being. So when you take away this overlay of what you think you are and who you think you are and where you think you are, what's left is God. And then when you feel that directly, the joy is immense.
John, presence.
Presence.
Awakening mystical consciousness.
Yeah.
Right?
Presence is a lot of people will talk about presence, but there weren't too many people I found that described what it is or how to experience it. But it's actually very simple, because it's all about not stopping thinking, shifting into a sensory mode, and beginning to sense the consciousness that is literally all around you. And you are not alone. There is consciousness everywhere, and as you sense it, you begin to realize that your consciousness is the presence, and that changes you over time. That makes you calmer, more loving, more awakened, more present to each other. It's the kind of change that will make our world differently if we can start doing it instead of, driving fast and earning money so much. So presence is the direct experience of the divine. as everything around you. And it's a consciousness. It's a consciousness literally is there to feel. It's not imaginary.
That place for me, John, is why I do. I'm sure you would echo that. It's when you have the blessed opportunity to touch that space. It's like everything. It's not like everything. Everything makes sense because, like you had talked about earlier, it's about getting so far removed from the what makes sense when you're in the world, but nonsense for those who are able to touch the garment. It's like this wellspring of bliss, happiness, joy, everything you can, and beyond what you ever postulated. It simply exists in this minuscule of an empty space.
Yeah, this is the via negativa. People will talk about finding God by having things taken away, by taking away who you think you are, where you think you are, by taking away your identity, your goals. When you erase all that stuff, what's left is the divine, and it happens naturally in aging, which I find so interesting because as you age, it's like tacking a jigsaw puzzle on the wall of your life and everything, and then watching it as the pieces fall away because you're not who you used to be. Your body's different. If you look at a recent photograph, you can't recognize this old guy that's sitting there. So much falls away of who you were. But what's magic about that is what's left is that you begin to discover that you're in a divine world. Of the three secrets of aging, one is that it's an initiation into this kind of awakening, and second is it's a transformation of self and consciousness, and thirdly, it's a revelation of heaven on earth because it never left. When we're little, as children, we are there. Wordsworth has this wonderful poem about. Let me see. I think I have it here someplace because it's the kind of poem that speaks to my experience. He says, "There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream." That's early childhood. That's the mystical experience. That's where we go back to. And he says, "It's not now as it hath been of yore, turn wheresoe'er I may, by night or day. The things which I have seen, I can see no more." And he says, "Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy." We all have this experience of a divine world when we're young, and then education, peers, parents, and the whole belief world, the whole conceptual world of the patriarchy takes over, and pretty soon we're a commodity. We're not good enough. We have this idea of who we think we should be. There's nothing good enough. Then you start this project of self that you have most of your life about being somebody that finally achieves something. It's all fraudulent. It's useful in organizing work, for example, who's going to do what, but it's not healthy for the soul because you give up the soul. By midlife in life, you begin to realize, oh my God, I may be successful or I may not be, but I'm so far removed from who I originally was and why I came into the world. And that's the true self. And actually, that's really the soul from the other world comes into space and shapes and gives birth to the true self, which is why we there are two sides of the same coin, which is why we use those two terms interchangeably. But by midlife, you lose it. You've forgotten who you are. And all the deconstruction of the second half of life is about coming back to to your soul, to the life you were meant to lead. And so what happens when in this extra new time of aging, we've got an extra 17, 18 years, 20 years of aging that our grandparents didn't have. It's the opportunity for a new blossom of your life to take place. And what's more profound, it's the blossom, the ultimate blossom that you never had time to do until now. Now you get to give birth to your creativity, your talent, your love for life, your social justice, whatever it is that is calling you. Now it's time. Now is the time to be it. You're back into that divine world, caring for it in a way that you never had time before.
John, would you announce how our listening audience can find you, website, Facebook, whatever it is you do, so they can find more about you and your delicious books and whatever it is, your speaking engagements if you're in their city?
Yeah, I'd love you have you come visit me. It's johnrobinson.org, John ROBINSON.org. We'll list all my books and where I'm going next and what I'm up to, and there's all. You can also interact with me. You can leave me messages, and I'm happy to respond to them.
Finding heaven here, where we really live. I love it because I already know it. I feel it. It's something I teach. I love it. Finding heaven here, where we really live.
Yeah. Yeah. All the mystics from around the world. This is a universal mystic experience, mystic vision. I mean,
John, if you would excuse me for one moment.
Yeah.
For those who are just coming on the page, or for those who may be, quote, new to this dialogue or lingo, please continue, but shortly give a description of what is a mystic.
A mystic is somebody who is capable of having a first-hand experience of ultimate reality, of the divine. In other words, we can have belief systems and creeds and philosophies, like in religion, and we can have a spirituality, which is our own personal take on all of that. And the next step into it is to transcend that and wake up in a space without thought, where you actually are back. You are literally into the divine, and the divine is in you. And it doesn't require. It's not woo-woo stuff. I mean, it really is. We are on the edge of mystical experience all the time, and then we run back into our brains. And so
right.
There's this battle really between left brain and right brain. The right brain is where the soul is, and they're two separate entities. That's what I was trying to say before. So the soul wants you to go outside and be in the world, which is radiant and beautiful and full of love. And the left brain says, you haven't worked hard enough, you're not smart enough, and you need to get more money, and you need to, develop a better false self. So this tug of war goes on all the time. But in those moments when we forget to think, and we're just standing in awe because, like we've seen our child for the first time counted the fingers and toes, and we say this, we are stunned. This is a miracle. And you can't make it into something other than what it is. And it's such an intensely perceptual experience. You are right there in the divine world for a while. You do that when you fall in love. You do that when you're on a raft going down the whitewater. You're so much in the intensity of the here and now. You can't think about your taxes. You can't think about your goals or your plans or anything. That's why people do wild and dangerous things, so they can be so fully alive that they escape their false self and they're in the divine world. The mystic is in all of that. And the thing is, as you get more deeply capable of living in mystical consciousness, you have a slower, more loving, more peaceful, more beautiful life that, you're not trying to figure things out anymore. You're not on a path anymore. You're just there. And that's when the divine world starts to light up all around you. And you wish you could say, and you do sometimes say to people, stop racing, stop everything you're doing, stop thinking. Start looking at where you are, and you'll discover that you live in an extraordinarily holy space.
Often I see people on the interstate or on the road, and they just can't wait to whiz by me.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing 45, and they're doing 60.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up at a traffic light. They race to a red light. But because I have the momentum of still going, it just so happens I pass through the light with ever stopping because I see the light change. And
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful lesson of nonsensical bullshit. Of
Yeah,
where are you going? You're not going anywhere.
There's no place to go. That's the
Yeah,
whole
so
point.
back to the question I think I posed. Where do we reside? Heaven, from here. I mean, so where are we really?
We are always in the divine world. We just impose this other belief world on top of it and then forget to see it anymore. It's a great tragedy of our evolution, and why this global climate change catastrophe is demanding that we wake up. Because if we keep living in this left brain world, we're on the Titanic, and it's going to be a horrible experience. People are not taking that seriously enough. But what I find interesting is that emergency consciousness You know what happens when when you're in the car and you lose control and it starts rolling. You wake up so intensely that time slows down almost to a stop, and you're that's mystical consciousness. And as this catastrophe begins to get our attention, we're all going to start waking up. If we can be ready and realize that this waking up is not just that we're scared, but that we're in a divine space, we may start handling this thing way differently. Then, because the risk is that we're going to get back into tribal, our old tribal energies and organizations and fight with each other and have wars over water and food and climate, where places we can live, and not get anything accomplished but murder. If we can use this awakened space that we are going to find ourselves in and realize that it's all around us. This place is already beautiful. What are we, we've got to now hold each other, love each other. When when a tsunami wipes through your village, you suddenly, the only thing that matters is the people you love, and holding them and being present to what the reality that's still here and growing a new world. And that's what a crisis like this is going to do for us if we wake up.
Well, I guess one part of that wake up would be a deeper knowing, a new way of seeing.
Yeah.
John, I always say that what you think is happening in the world isn't.
That's right.
What you think isn't likely is. So what you are seeing in this arena of illusion, as a rule, the closer you are mundanely focused, the more unconscious you are about what is transpiring. But as you begin to back your perspective off, almost as if pulling to outer space, you no longer see the earthly drama because now you're seeing a planet floating in space. So it's and people say, well, Keith, aren't you losing compassion in this motion to separate? No, trust me, I'm not separating. In my perspective of pulling back, I am connecting to where, by mere will, when I want to insert something, because most of the time I want to be quiet, that I conserve my power, that when I have something to say, because of my perspective, the message I deliver from that internal space has so much more punch. What is your thought about that?
Oh, yeah, I think that the deeper you go inside and the more you speak from that deep place, the more you have to give the world. Most of the time we're talking from our heads and it's just a mile a minute and it's meaningless talk. It's kind of like, I was thinking as you were talking about, like people who get stuck in an elevator together, or get stuck at the bottom of the mine shaft for 3 days. They might have been strangers. Within hours, within a couple of days, they are seeing each other and being close and present to each other, and they would give their lives to each other in that moment of being present in that extraordinary time. That's the opportunity we have here. With our great left hemisphere, and then with our social media and with our technology, we know we are Narcissus looking in the water at our own reflection. We are fascinated by the Kardashians and all the famous people, and we're not awake anymore. We're living in a dream world of our own projections, and that's allowing the real world to crumble because we keep exploiting it and using it and cutting down the forests and so forth, and the disaster that we're creating are because we are so focused on the false self and the false world. You don't cut down a tree when you have been close to it for years. You love that tree, and it's like kind of a sense that when I'm in the woods and I'm close to this tree, I know the tree is aware of me, and I'm aware of the tree, and I know the tree is really glad that one person has stopped and taken in that energy and that consciousness. And there's a kind of communion that happens that makes me so grateful that tree is growing there. That's the way we need to be with the world now.
I love it. A lot of people say, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Goddamn right I am. I'm freaking crazy as a
Yeah.
loon.
I got 2 doctorates. I am crazy, but I finally come to understand what being alive is about.
There's a method to my madness.
Yeah.
So, John, give me you got another half hour in you, sir? I
Sure.
don't want to keep you.
Keep going. Yeah.
How do you suggest a person can actually begin to engage a different way of seeing?
Okay, so there's just so many ways to do it. I mean, there's meditation, there's mindfulness, there's just walking in the woods. What you want to do is step outside of this pinball game mentality that we're in all the time, where we're constantly being triggered by what somebody said, with the guy in the road, our own thoughts. We need to, like you needed to take this time away from the work in order to let the whole thing settle. Lao Tzu says, muddy water let stand becomes clear. And that's what we need to do. We need to have silence and stillness and quiet to get away from the world, and then drop down into the natural essence of being. From that place, you begin to see everything very differently. That's why being with little children is so fascinating, because they live in that world. And when I'm with my grandchildren, that too is a spiritual practice, because we are living so intensely in the here and now of my expression, his expression, my game, his game, this walk. And you can't push a 2-year-old down the sidewalk. They will stop when they want to stop, and they will do what they want to do. And if you join them, you are living in that other world. So there's dozens of ways to do this. The practice that I would recommend would be to get there most quickly, for example, is to just go find some place in nature and just sit still and begin to focus on your perceptual or sensory awareness. In other words, don't think about things. Pick up a piece of grass, pick up a leaf and smell it and touch it and be present. Look at it as intensely and clearly as you can. Spend an hour doing nothing but just watching what's around you, watching an ant crawl around a corner. You will begin to realize that the divine world is here, and that as you watch this, you are slowing down and entering it just by virtue of being present to it. Everybody knows how good it is to be. I mean, like fly fishermen, I think they go out there just for the silence, just for the beauty, just for the mood.
Yes.
It's a Zen practice.
Yeah.
Anything that gives you that kind of Zen practice is it. And then the thing is not to race back into the world, but to bring that quiet consciousness into
With
the
you.
Talk more slowly, walk more slowly, talk more consciously, so you're really saying something, not just chattering. That's the stuff. We can all do it. It's not rocket science.
John, my father is a personification of South Louisiana. And when I go to South Louisiana, and all of my life growing up, when I go in not the swamp, that's hard bottom, the marsh, the salt water, the serenity out there, the scaring about creatures, the salt. Oh my God, there's just this spirit, this presence.
You feel the presence in wilderness. It's so much easier to feel the life that is now pervasive, not just in this plant or in this person, but everywhere. Yeah, that's why I think when you get into your senses, you come back to the divine world. And interestingly, when you get into your senses, you stop thinking. That's the key. People meditate, they say, "Oh, I can't stop my thoughts." But instead, if you go out and you just get intensely sensory and look at something, find one object to fixate on and look at it for 2 minutes, and at the same time become conscious of consciousness, you will soon notice that consciousness is now all around you and you have come into the presence. It's that simple.
Tap in. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Center of Light Radio, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Final half hour with my dear friend, Mr. John C. Robinson. We're going to be right back. Let me see what song I'm going to play. Lavender Soul, my spiritual band, comprised of members of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. I love this project. We got a new album we're going to start working on. And in 2 weeks, we're going to record the album while we're writing it. I'm so excited. Check it out.
I will be with you always, until the end of time. You will never be alone. I am.
I feel you there beside me. All of my lives, all through my days, I've seen places far away. Wondering just when, time and again, I have come to know you. Wondering just when, time and again, you are there beside me. When I create, when I feel love, whenever I feel you with me, I celebrate times of my life. There is only you and me. Help me know
It is my will that you know me. I will not hide my love from you. You create your reality, and every moment by your own perceptions, your judgments, actions. Peace is a state of mind. Bliss is a state of heart. Heaven is a state of being.
deep in my heart, I know you're there. I can always feel you guiding my life to see the light that will lead me to the truth. When I create, when I feel love, whenever I feel you with me, I celebrate times of my life. There is only you and me. For you are my mother,
My soul.
my divine lover. I celebrate times of my life. There is only you and me. Help me live.
Welcome back to Center of Light Radio. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, your host. Wednesday night, 7 p.m. You can always find this broadcast on my personal wall, facebook.com/Keith Anthony Blanchard, or facebook.com/Center of Light Radio. Center of Light Radio is now 24/7-ish. The ish part of all that is because when I do a broadcast, a presentation, like what I'll be doing in the next half, maybe 45 minutes from now, at the top of the new hour. How is that? My presentation is going to be on See the Light, the theme song I've been using for years from Lavender Soul, which I've now retired. But the song See the Light is going to be the premise of the broadcast, the presentation. But we're going to, as many years as I've been doing presentations about soul this and soul that, I never really did a presentation on light. So tonight's presentation at 9:30, I believe, is going to be about light. What is light? We have an idea. We understand it at our essence of who we are, but do we know it in a usable fashion? John, welcome back to Center of Light Radio, brother.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the what you got, my brother. What do you got?
Well, I just thought it might be really helpful if I gave you an example of a mystical experience.
When I said when I was going to ask you one of those questions, what it was like to be you in a mystical experience, I was going to ask you Tell me a mystical experience.
I've been collecting mystical experiences for over 2 decades. I mean, this is why I think they're the most potent and powerful revelation of the way of the world as it truly is, and not the way we project onto it. So here's an example. This guy says, often during my late 20s and early 30s, I had a good deal of depression. At the age of 33, I felt I must be going mad. I felt shut up in a cocoon in complete isolation and could not get in touch with anyone. Things came to such a pass, and I was so tired of fighting that I said one day, I can do no more. Let nature or whatever is behind the universe look after me now. Within a few days, I passed from hell to a heaven. It was as if the cocoon had burst and my eyes were opened and I saw. The world was infinitely beautiful, full of light, as if lit from an inner radiance. Everything was alive, and God was present in all things. In fact, the earth, all plants and animals and people seemed to be made of God. All things were one, and I was one with all creation and held safe within a deep love. I was filled with peace and joy and with deep humility and could only bow down in the holiness of the presence of God. It was as if scales had fallen from my eyes and I saw the world as it truly was. This is the theme that happens over and over again. We get stuck in a cocoon, a bubble of the left brain belief system about what things are. And then when we shift over, either we have a, well, you know, the person who had that stroke, Jill Bolt Taylor, had this left hemisphere stroke, so it shut down the left brain. And what it was so amazing about that was that suddenly she had to live in her right brain for a period of time, and everything became beautiful. She lost a sense of self that had been containing her, and she was one with the universe, one with the light. And this person was a neuroscientist. She was not someone who was likely to be, taken in by woo-woo. She was experiencing it firsthand for herself. So when the left brain lets go and we open to this expansive experience, the world literally changes before our eyes. It's not imagination. It's the intensification of the existence of being. And the reason it's good to share mystical experiences with each other is that everybody's had little ones, and many of us have had big ones. And when I tell you mine, they remind you of yours. And pretty soon we're all sharing them. And more than that, pretty soon it's affecting our consciousness. We're actually beginning to wake up because it's like bringing that mystical experience back to life. If you've had a big mystical experience and you talk about it in a safe and loving place, my God, it begins to come alive again. That's part of the magic of it. The consciousness is still in the memory, and pretty soon you start seeing the world with more brightness and more color and more, amazing.
A lot of spiritual people, John,
yeah,
will say that you shouldn't share those sacred parts of God dang, I want to share my shit. I want to tell John what just happened to me last night. I can't wait to wake up and contact his ass and say, look, dude, I was playing around the Godhead last night, and that makes John go, whoa, dude, give me some of what you got. Yeah. It's this fire that you can't keep to yourself. John, right. When you were talking about what a mystical experience is, I thought of something I wrote about in my last book, For the Love of God, A Spiritual Journey. I would like to read it because it also, you shared, here we go, you shared your mystical experience with me, now I'm going to share mine with you. How beautiful is that? This is freaking powerful. It's a mystical experience, a new way of seeing things, as John poetically said. Check this out. Let me find my document. Here we go. A vision of God. He walked by me every day, the one they call the Christ. He blessed some, ignored others. I don't know why. I want to meet his eyes to see the face of God. But he did not see me. He saw everyone else, not me. Why not me? Then his eyes looked away and my life was changed. For one eternal precious moment, I saw divinity. I saw God and he saw me. His eyes turned away, but he still sees me. As I said, what you have just read is exactly how. So that's the image. When you have that awakening, that moment, that experience that brings you it's not even really far back because it's not a linear thing. It's this place that it's like I said earlier, it's a remembering that when you get better at it, because when you become an active mystic, you're intending to invite those experiences into your life, like I'm sure you're doing every day, John. In fact, it's probably default for you now. It's just second nature. It's part of who you are. You no longer have to lift the weight, so to speak.
And you see, I think our future, our spiritual evolutionary future, is all about living in mystical consciousness, a sustained mystical consciousness. Abraham Maslow, the father of humanistic psychology, near the end of his life, he had this heart attack, and he only lived for another 4 or 5 months after that. But he called it his post-mortal experience, but a post-mortem experience. But what he began to notice was that his mystical consciousness became what he called a plateau experience. It became his like you say, default state. And he said it was as if a mystical experience had begun to settle in as your continuous reality. This is where we're heading. This is the kind of world that will reveal heaven on earth to be everywhere and everything, and will change the way we live in the world. This is the ultimate activism, is this mystical consciousness.
John, let's talk about enlightened elders and transformational mystics. A new aging. When you and I talk, I love the fact that you love the art of the aging process. And some of the dialogues you and I have had about aging and the beauty of it and the grace of it. Let's talk about the elders.
Aging used to be viewed as such a grim and depressing experience, and in much of our past it could be pretty grim and depressing. For all of recorded history, only 1 out of 10 people ever got to be 65, and now in developed countries, nearly 8 out of 10 of us will get to be 65. And if you get to be 65, you got another 17 to 19 years of life to live. And so the question is, what is this for? I mean, is this just sitting around waiting for the reaper, or is this a new developmental stage in the human life cycle? And that's what I've come to believe. And there are more and more organizations like Saging International and Elders Aging Network and Creation Spirituality that are looking at aging as a spiritual stage that is really bringing this in the entire Earth community. So here we are in this new time of life, and getting closer to death. And the value of getting close to the death is that, we don't hang on to the false self anymore because you can't take it with you. And in the process of letting go of that, and knowing that your time, I'm 72, knowing that your time is limited, everything becomes more precious. And then that here and now precious consciousness takes you right into mystical consciousness. It's like aging itself becomes a mystical experience that will increasingly transform the world and bring peace to the world. If in 15 years, what is it? I think at least a third of this nation is going to be over 65, and 10,000 people a day are turning 65 these days.
Wow!
So if even a percentage of those people woke up and said, "Oh my God, look at where I am. This is spectacular. I don't want fighting anymore." Young countries, countries with young people are much more likely to have wars than countries with old people. And the more old people we get, the more peace we're going to find, and the more we can mentor the young and bring peace into our world and learn from the young and create a new kind of life for all of us.
John, since I've been knowing you, this is my 4th interview with you. My first interview, I posed a question. You answered it so poetically, and I felt it important, tonight no exception, to bring it up again. The question I posed to you, sir, I think it's a deserving question, a beautiful question, one that needs to be given attention to for those out there who may have a concern about your mortality. And have you not noticed every breath we take, we are dying. Jim Morrison says, no one gets out of here alive. As we move closer to the truth, you would think a person naturally goes into this place of, oh my God, I'm a day older, I'm a day closer to death. That's not what happens. Are we given grace about our mortality the closer we get to it? Almost so much grace that we start to invite it.
Yeah, I think, well, that's complicated, because I think that aging, as we age, we get less afraid of death. We get more okay with it, though we are, people still worry about how it's going to happen and whether there's going to be pain and fear and helplessness in the moment. But the thing is that, and it's axiomatic that we die the way we've lived. If we are someone who is reflective and open and accepting of the evolution of our life, then death will be a natural thing. If we've been combative and fighting, then death will be difficult. But everyone in the last moments dies at peace, and nobody dies alone. The research, the near-death research, really does say that people come and get you, and you're not. The other side opens up to you. People in their final hours see the world as more radiant, and literally it's the mystical experience beginning to really shine through them into the world, and they begin to have deathbed visions of their loved ones coming to help them across. So
what you're John, what you're saying is, the closer we get to death, from your experience of your intuition, people you've worked with, just being the guy that you are, the closer we get to death, the tunnel, the vision, the mysticism, the mystic experience that begins to happen to say, you see, most people, unless you die in a car wreck, but even so, your death doesn't happen like that. It does not. It's a gradation of something coming to you. But are you saying that the experience that someone happens as they get for those who are on the deathbed, as that window begins to open up, that as a practicing mystic, that we can actually excite that experience to have it now, so our gradation into death is even more glorious and graceful and seamless?
I really believe that the only difference between this world and the next world is our conceptual boundaries that we make. And that as we begin to wake up and stop separating, that you really can have ongoing relationships with people who are, quote, dead on the other side. And that, in fact, they oftentimes have much to say to us and actually want to come and be part of our lives. All cultures have revered the deceased and include them in their lives, except us, because we've been stuck in the scientific positivism that says if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. But the fact is that relationships with ancestors, parents and grandparents and so forth, and angels and spirit guides, it's all available to us even right now when we stop thinking, stop building this wall, and begin to learn a dialogue process where we start communicating with these people. You will discover they'll start communicating with you back in dreams, and also in just an unfolding dialogue process. And so I think you're right. At the end of life, especially when my father was dying, I was upset and I was teary, and he said to me, "Don't cry, John. I have seen the other side, and I'm not afraid to die." And he died peacefully. He had seen through. And my mother, when she was dying, was up there talking to somebody, she was, and asking questions about what she was going to do there and what kind of work would she be doing there, because she was a social activist. She wanted to do good works. And I'm sure they were beginning to explain things to her. So it doesn't end here. I mean, we scare the crap out of ourselves with our feelings about that death is going to be the end of everything. And the truth is that it is a glorious transformation, but it is like birth. I mean, there's some struggle to it, especially if you're holding on too tight.
Coincidentally, that brings us to our final subject talk point: reaching through the veil.
Yeah.
Right? How do we do it? What is it? What is the veil? How do we do it? What's all the bells and whistles, nuts and bolts about that?
One part of the veil is your belief systems and your thinking. You see, as long as you name and label and think about everything, you've got the veil up there. It's like a big glass wall that you've painted over so intensely you can't see the other side.
So it's a projection.
It's a projection, yeah, of everything, and you do it with each other and you reinforce each other's projections. But if you clean that glass plate, you begin to see through to the other side in many different kinds of ways. Now, the thing is that the right brain really is the mystical consciousness is an opening to the divine consciousness, which is everywhere. So it crosses to the other side. If you will start a dialogue, pick someone from who is deceased that you want to maintain a relationship with, or start one up again, and start a dialogue with them. Start writing it in your journal. The left brain, the ego you, will say, "Hey, Dad, what you doing these days? Is heaven a good place to be? What do you think?" And then let something happen, and the right side of your brain will respond. It will use the left brain's language ability, and something will come out, and then you say, "Oh, really? Well, tell me more about that." And something else will come up, and by the end of the conversation, and you just know it came from the other side, because it's been so surprising, and things have been revealed that you never would have thought of on your own. This whole thing happens that reveals that the world is, on the other side, is much more available to us than we ever knew. Shamans knew this. They were always going and traveling from one dimension to the other. We just don't believe it's possible. And our belief systems are a prison of the mind that keep us locked up and suffering.
John, in the Facebook forum, Teresa Soto says, the key to death is life.
Well, life goes on. But it's like you're not going to...
You have to live fully. You just have to live fully in the transition.
Yeah.
Whatever your circumstances are, just, oh my God, it doesn't matter. I thought this was life. What's about to happen? Because you've connected via your life, because you've lived life so richly. I often say your fear of death is not a fear of death at all. It's a fear that you die with regret, that you've not actually allowed yourself to live.
That's people's biggest regrets, is that they didn't do the things they wanted to do. They didn't take risks.
John, you have any final thoughts before we close the show, sir? And would you please give out your contact information?
Yeah, so it's www.johnrobinson.org. Let me just reflect on that for a second. What would I want to say? In this moment, we are already there.
Right.
I'm there, you're there. We are in the divine world. Everything we see is alive with divine consciousness. Only God exists. Everything else is is our living dream that we put on top of it. And the waking up is the idea that you have to be on a spiritual journey that takes all your life, is an idea that will lock you into that belief system, and you'll wait all your life trying to figure out whether you're there or not. My advice is to stop thinking, heighten awareness, experience the world intensely with awe, the way it really is, and come into the presence, and you will be there.
John, what is your contact, sir?
www.johnrobinson.org. Come see me.
John, thank you. I appreciate you, bro. What a delight it was for me. It still
It's
is. This energy is going to linger. It's going to move over to my next presentation. I'll be thinking about you all night, brother.
Yeah, ditto.
Blessings. Everyone, Mr. John C. Robinson. Now you understand why I like this guy so much. He's the real deal. There's nothing plastic there. He's all some organic. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Center of Light Radio. Next week on Center of Light Radio, my guest is going to be, let me see if I can get this together, software, lots of buttons, Mr. P.J. Galati, Phil Galati, the producer of Do What You Love, A Path to Passionate Living, the movie about my life as a spiritual teacher and full-time musician. Remember, when you got nothing to do late at night, you're laying down preparing for bed, breathe. Well, Keith, I'm breathing already. Breathe on purpose. Do that for 10-15 minutes with the intention of connecting, and that you will fall into the sea of profound, deafening silence. I love you. Peace, love, and always live in the light.
Well, I guess we're done.